Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Dynamic Growth Podcast. Today, we wanted to talk about the skills gap and the gap between the workers that employers need and the work that the workers are trained and willing to do. Somebody that has been talking about this with a lot of different employers and could provide some really interesting insight. Carly Snyder, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, thanks. I'm happy to be here.
So I guess we could just start right there. So what kind of conversations are you having with people? Because the topic was actually your idea, and it was a really interesting topic to bring up. I feel like I could provide some sort of insight because normally when we talk about like marketing and stuff, I can provide very little insight. I'm just like queuing you up with questions, and it makes for a good podcast. But I think this time I might actually be able to provide some insight for myself.
Nice. Yes, perfect. So, yeah, this topic is interesting. So, I've been doing some research for a couple of different clients around just industry trends, what's going on and what's impacting the market or their ability to reach their goals, right? And one of the sectors that I've been doing quite a bit of research on is around manufacturing. And I think that the what we've found is it applies across really every industry and every sector, but in manufacturing in particular, there's this huge gap of skills, and there's so many jobs that are going to be open that they're predicting will be open by 2030. It's like 2 million jobs or something, right? And that's humongous. It's a
Yeah.
huge problem. And when you look at I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn during the day for our clients. And when you look at there's constantly people I'm hiring or I need a job. It's like, why aren't these people able to connect, like get these jobs? There's so
Mhm.
many people that are unemployed. There's so many jobs that are open. What's the issue? And I think it comes down to this topic. And that's why I thought it might be a fun one for us to talk about today.
I think a really good illustration of this problem is around like some of the conversation with like green energy, because people will talk about green energy creating all these jobs, but those jobs would have been filled by like coal miners in West Virginia, let's say. So it's like the jobs that are going to be created by green energy are like software, like people that are it's like such a highly skilled job to be able to like build wind turbines. It's not the same job as coal mining,
Yep.
and it's not like disparaging to coal mining because that's like literally one of the most difficult jobs you could do. It's just a completely different type of skill. So it's
Yep.
not like uh the new jobs that will be created will replace the jobs that are being destroyed. It's like there's no overlap on that circle, and then the location in which they are being created. Like nobody's building these big solar farms, at least at the scale that's going to replace some of these jobs. They're not building them in West Virginia. Most of them, let's say they're being built in California. Like
Right.
a coal miner in West Virginia is not going to uproot their life to go build solar panels and wind turbines in California. Like, so I
Nope.
think that is a pretty good illustration of the problem there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're exactly right. It's not just people are retiring and, we just have so many jobs we need to fill. It truly is it's a skills issue. It's
Mhm.
not a, massive amount of employment opportunities issue. So yeah, I think it's an interesting one. And I spend a lot of time, helping employers with, what are your goals going to be? What are you focused on? And, historically, it's very focused around new product development or opening, the sales channel or reaching a new market, whatever it may be. And it feels like this year in particular, the conversations are really oriented around employees, satisfaction, retainment, and so on. It feels like everybody now is feeling it's a problem and we have to truly address it at this point. So how do you address it? Right. That's some of the stuff I think we want to try and chat about today.
Yeah, you brought up a good point when we just hopped on. You this was a problem that was like kind of being talked about. Like this is a future problem. Like when all these baby boomers retire, like that's going to create problems with Social Security. That's going to create problems with the labor
Yep.
market. And it was like a problem that was just talked about like almost as if it was never going to happen. But now it's like rubber hits the road, and the problems are actually coming to fruition.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think the baby boomers generation is truly retiring at this point. I think, yeah, like you said, it's always been sort of on the horizon. Like, oh, we better make sure we know what they do and get
Yeah,
their
right.
knowledge.
Yeah.
But like, I hope you did because they're actually leaving now. But And truly, the jobs have changed. Like you're probably not necessarily even just backfilling that person anymore. There's so much more, whether it's technology or what you like what you're saying, businesses have changed. What they're doing has changed. So you can't just drop and replace in a new person and get them up and running quickly like you maybe could have done historically.
Yeah, especially somebody that, I mean, if they're at retirement age, they probably have, I mean, 30, 40 years of experience under their belt. That's going to be somebody that's extremely difficult to replace. And like the amount of people that are leaving with that type of experience is nowhere near met by this
No.
by the millennials or whatever the generation is behind baby boomers that are going to fill all of those like roles that require all that experience.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And technology, like we talk a lot about chat gpt and ai, and I know that's something that you get excited about.
Yeah, too
But
excited.
I did actually I found a statistic from Deloitte about they were quoting the World Economic Forum, but they had said humans working with machine algorithms will lead to 97 million new roles by 2025, and that's obviously across
Sure.
the gamut of industry. But that, and then it said 50% of global workforce, which is 1 billion people, will need to be reskilled by 2030. So there, I mean, there's a whole article and report that follows it, but it's just the numbers are huge when you think about
Yeah,
2030 is not that far away.
for
And to
sure.
think about how many people are going to be impacted by what's coming, and do they even, who plays a role in trying to fix this for us? So
I think that that's really interesting. Hold on one second. Before I wanted to get actual some stats on the table here, just so kind of people can deal with the numbers in their head. So the actual unemployment rate right now sits at 3.6%, which I mean, historically speaking, that's pretty low. Like you'd
yeah.
have to like pre-COVID, it got that low. But the thing that people often criticize, and correctly so, the reason or they criticize the unemployment rate because it doesn't take into account the people that stop looking for a job altogether. It's only calculating the people that are looking for a job that have a job. So
Yep.
it's a meaningful statistic. It's not like it's not like you should completely throw it out because that's an important number. And it would actually be a muddy statistic if it was like calculating people that weren't even trying to look for a job in the first place.
Right.
So like it's criticized because people use it in the wrong context, but it is a meaningful statistic in itself. And then one that might be even uh, more relevant to the conversation we're having is the labor force participation rate, which sits at around 62.5%, which fell
Yikes.
like which has fallen like clockwork since the 2000 like early 2000s, essentially late 90s, which
Yeah.
hovers around 67%. So it's never been like 100% or anything. And then if you look at before the 90 or sorry before the 1970s, it's actually lower than it is today when we had
Yeah.
a much more heavy like manufacturing base with our economy. But like today, it's most of the manufacturing is done overseas. It's pretty well known.
Yeah. Well, and that's what makes it tough, right? It's like the jobs are potentially offshore, but yet who's going to go to school? Like, who wants to go necessarily get training to do all this engineering work or whatever it is, but yet the work is potentially done in another country, or right, their job may get
Mhm.
moved or whatever it is, right? There's risk there, and potentially people are like, well, I'll just go into something else because I don't want to deal with it.
So this is definitely something you would know better than I would. But like the conversations that people are having about manufacturing in the United States, is it like at least from like the political rhetoric side of it, it's like the people on the right will say like, oh, regulation's too high and it's too expensive. The work is too expensive to do here because you have to
Yeah.
hire more people, you have labor unions, all this stuff. It makes it too expensive to do here. Uh, why can't we just like find cheaper options offshore, essentially?
Yeah.
Yeah. So is that actually true? I guess is that really the problem where people just don't want to invest the resources just because it's so expensive to do it domestically?
I think cost is probably a big part of it. Yeah. I
I mean,
mean, getting
definitely, yeah, it's
something,
definitely a part of it for sure.
yeah, like starting something from scratch is definitely going to take you, it's a long-term investment. And, so many things can change between the day you start and the day you finally start getting profit out of it.
Mhm.
Um, but I think also workforce plays an issue. I think how are you going to staff it? And some of these factory jobs or manufacturing jobs tend to be the hardest to fill. I mean, you can't find the labor in the locations that you build these facilities. So yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely plays a big role.
Yeah. And then this is interesting because it's like manufacturing in itself is like highly capital intensive. So companies that have like infinite amounts of capital to pull from, like let's say Amazon, for instance, they can devote a lot of resources towards automation.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of the route that like companies like Amazon will go down is they'll just use the billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that they have to
Yeah.
basically make an upfront investment rather than just like pay the constant variable rate of just like training people, employee
Yep.
turnover, all that stuff. That's might be more expensive in the long run, but it's not as big of a capital expenditure up front. So that's
Yeah.
also definitely a part of it where some businesses are just like, we're going to devote all the resources towards automation and not necessarily training new workers or trying to. I mean, I don't even, as an employer, how would you even fix it? Because it's such a structural problem. Like, it's not like one company can train all of these workers. It's like we're talking
No.
about structural problem, and then like the companies are just faced with how do we deal with this structural problem?
Yeah. I mean, I just think as a company, it's probably changing a model of you don't necessarily need to find, this degree from someone coming out of college or a university. It's more like, or trade, a trade program, but it's more like just come here and we'll just teach you what you need to know. We'll
Hmm.
certify you. You'll be
Sure.
Amazon certified. You'll be Microsoft certified. You'll be Crosby Advisory certified.
Yeah.
Um, and you just sort of say forget it as long as you have some ability to learn and you're willing to do things like pick up new technology, learn it, take a
Hmm.
training course, show pride, come to work every day, be conscientious, be on time. I think those kinds of skills are going to raise to the top. um, and employers will just say, be a good mold of a person, of an
Yeah.
employee, and we'll train you the rest of the way. Because I think that's what they're going to have to do.
And then on the shortage front, like the people that are able to fill those roles will be highly compensated. So like it never made
Yes.
sense to me like why so I'm not that far removed from the education system. I didn't graduate that long ago.
Yeah.
Um and it like especially when I was in high school, it was so stigmatized if you weren't going to college. Like I mean I call it I don't even know what else you would call it besides propaganda that people are so pressured and so incentivized uh well not I wouldn't even say incentivized because the incentives do not reward you for taking on massive amounts of debt and getting a college degree. The incentives
Correct.
used to be there where you could graduate with any degree from anywhere and you would have a pretty nice job on the other side of it. And that's just not the case now. So it's completely lost on me why it is so stigmatized to go to a trade school when those are the last jobs that will get automated away. Like when we talk about AI and stuff, the first jobs that are getting automated away with like chat gpt, we're kind of getting a taste of it. It's the
Yeah.
the entry level white collar jobs that are getting automated away, like the super repetitive tasks. Those are
Yep.
super easy to automate away with software. But you're like we're so many decades away from like actual robots doing
Right.
manufacturing labor and like highly skilled labor. Like that's so many decades away, even if you
Yep.
or even if you take into consideration like the exponential growth of technology. This is so far away. We're not even close to robots being able to do highly skilled manufacturing labor. So it's completely lost on me why we don't emphasize trade schools. It seems like a
Yeah.
no-brainer to me.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of apprenticeship programs and such available through employers because they'll sponsor you to go and do it because they
Mhm.
can't they
It's cheaper. Like
it's
like if you know you're going to have a good employee on the other end of it, it's like that's
exactly.
so much more like it's such a more effective use of your resources to do that rather than just like the crapshoot of just like posting a job online, and then you'll probably like the employee turnover is insane where you get some guy that looks really good in an interview, and then you're still taking the risk that he might be a crappy employee.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah. I mean, and it's not even just in manufacturing, any trade. Like when I got
sure.
my floors put in a couple of years ago, I talking with the people who owned the company I used, I mean, they were saying just to get installers, it's like to get
Hmm.
a good one or a good handful, they were doing apprenticeships, they were sending people to school to learn the trade, and then they were being really good to them so that they would stay with them because it's so
That's a good
important to
idea. That
have
that sounds like a good idea to me.
it's so important to have somebody you can trust and they're reliable and your customers are going to have to then trust. And yeah, I mean, it's absolutely worth it in the long run.
Yeah, 100%. So I mean, yeah, I mean on like a firm level, I think that's a pretty good idea. Like obviously I don't run a large manufacturing company, but I mean that's that seems like a pretty decent solution, or at least something to have in your arsenal to like start working towards or something like that. But
Yeah.
and then another thing is another interesting aspect that we can tackle this from is it's not just uh like baby boomers retiring. This has been, if you look at like this labor force participation chart, which I'll overlay on the video here if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it's fallen like clockwork ever since like the late 1990s, which is, I mean, this is doing bro statistics. Like this isn't actually doing any like statistical analysis or anything, but it's at least a correlation that a lot of these trade deals that were signed in the late 90s uh, correspond with kind of the peak in the labor force participation rate. So this decline in the labor force participation rate is not caused by one thing, it's caused by a lot of different things. And I think a big part of that is sending manufacturing jobs overseas. Like we kind of just like delegated that when, and I mean it's basically prioritizing short-term profits because it is very profitable in the short term to do that because your labor costs are cut in half. But then like the long-term implications of that are now we're running into all these problems where I mean you could whether you're talking about automation that would be solved if manufacturing was done here, that issue, like there's just a lot of issues that would be fixed if we did more stuff domestically.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a bunch, like you said, that's been happening in the background for years and
Mhm.
years and years that nobody thought anything of. But when you look at it, there was all these milestones happening that were leading us to where we are today. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
So the other interesting piece is around the role colleges and universities play.
Yeah,
So
right.
the I was actually this morning, I was talking with Mike's daughter. She's 10. And Avery was asking me, well, what are you doing today? And I said, oh, I'm doing a podcast this morning. And she asked me the topic, and I told her, and I said, well, what would you say? And I was actually very taken aback. She said, I wrote it down. She said, colleges need to check up what they're teaching, which is actually kind of hilarious because she's kind of spot on. Like she was like, I mean, they're obviously teaching the wrong stuff. It's
Yeah,
like,
right.
you're kind of right.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it's an interesting, like, how do some of these higher education or even trade institutions, like, how do they get the right kinds of training and the right kinds of, whether it's a major or a program in place for some of these skills, like working with machine, like AI or,
Mhm.
machine learning, or, like there should be classes on how to do some of this stuff and teach people how to engage with technology as part of your job, because that's where it's going to be, right? Like, um, getting people introduced to how they might be engaging with stuff like that or cybersecurity or whatever it is. There's so many of these things that are popping up, and they're only going to continue to get more prevalent.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the baked in assumption there is that colleges actually care about creating productive workers. And I think that like if you look at the results and the outcomes, I think it's very clear that that is not a goal of the universities. They're basically trying to get you to leave with a piece of paper so that you can become a college administrator somewhere. That's like 90% of the degrees.
True.
There's no jobs for any of these degrees. And then like
It's
the
true.
because again, going back to my point that it's basically propaganda where you're just like, just get the piece of paper. Anything's better
Yeah.
than not having a college degree. It doesn't matter what it's in. And it's like that's not true. It's like you should actually leave college with a set of skills that are desirable by an employer. I
Yes.
again, I'm not that far removed from the education system. Not once did they ever talk about like how to make yourself more attractive to future employers. Not
Or
once.
like,
Like you think that would be the number one thing that they talk about. They don't talk
or
about it
like,
at all.
yeah, or like, what job are you going to have? Because like you go to school for whatever
Yeah.
major, right? Like
Uh-huh.
economics, let's
Yeah,
say. It's like
sure.
you could do a million different things with an economics degree. Like, what are you going to do with it? Because that's a skill then that you need to start developing.
And another thing is like that's a conversation to be had on day one. It's like
Yes.
when you sign up for I mean, it's crazy, but like a $20,000 loan is like conservative now. And that's like on the low
Right.
end of the spectrum. It's like people
Yikes.
take out 50 grand a year to go to school. I mean, even more than that sometimes. So it's like
Yeah.
uh so again, have those conversations of like what skills are you actually going to get? It's so if you were going to spend $50,000 on anything, a car, like well in advance the benefits that you're getting when you make that big of a commitment to something.
Yeah.
It's like people are, and it's taking advantage of kids because 18-year-olds are stupid, but like you're taking
Yes.
advantage of people that are under a lot of pressure, under societal pressure because you're a loser if you don't go to college. And it's like as long as you get into the college that you want to get into, that's the main thing. But it's not like what's the end goal? Why do I actually want to go to college? What's the end goal of college?
Exactly.
And like what skills am I actually going to develop?
Yep.
They'll let you the banks or the whoever's lending student loans, they'll let you take out $50,000 student loans on a degree that they know will not get you any money on the other side of it. Like how is like we're in clown world? Like how is that possible that both parties
Yeah.
agree to this? Both
Yeah.
parties,
We're both good.
yeah, like the bank agrees and the person signing up for it agrees. It's clown world.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. So, yeah, I mean, and who knows? Maybe it'll never change. Maybe both win. The university wins to get their money. The bank wins because they got a
Yeah,
loan at a high interest rate.
that you can't
So,
default on. That you can't default on. It's like
right.
if you declare
So,
bankruptcy, you still have to pay on that loan.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I guess why bother changing it, right? So,
Yeah.
it's an interesting one, but there's got to be more. I don't know. Like you said, I mean, I think Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy, I
Mm-hmm.
think he's obviously a big advocate for, doing not necessarily going to college. And there's a lot of different things you can do with the degree with a trade program. And actually, just saying the word Mike Rowe is going to make Nate laugh because we have a family joke about Mike Rowe. Because my dad once said that he hated him for no reason at all, and we're like, but he's so great, and now he denies saying it. But so we have a family joke about Mike Rowe.
That's
But I
fun.
actually saw him speak once, and he was awesome. He was because he's very charismatic and he's
Mm-hmm.
kind of funny, and he really like just tells you exactly how it is. And I think he has a pretty good program. But anyway, there's people like that are definitely advocating, but I don't think it necessarily funnels into schools and
Mm-hmm.
parents
Right.
and people that are influencing children to make these decisions. And
Yeah.
the other random thing there too, we were playing the game of life not that long ago. And it was like a relatively new version. And I hadn't played it in years. And now you can like choose, you go like the college path or the trade path. Like you like go a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And I went the trade path because I was like, I want to see what this is gonna do. And of
Yeah.
course,
Right.
it made way less money and like all this stuff. And I was
Yeah.
like, this game is total crap.
It's
Like,
propaganda. This game is
yes,
propaganda.
yes. I was like, the game of life needs to be updated. Like, this is
Yeah.
ridiculous. We are still influencing people.
Yeah.
And all
Like I
the kids
mean,
were like, we got to go to college. I'm like, no.
yeah, right. So I mean, think about like just like word association almost. Like think about like when you think about the jobs people can get with the college degree, that like it's actually if it's actually worth it, you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, a programmer, an engineer. And then I mean, there's like a business degree is probably like the wild card where it's like a coin flip because
Yeah.
there's a lot of stupid business degrees too that you can get. But then
Yes.
like yeah, I mean, if you go to a trade school and if you're in a good market, you can be like me and Nate talk about this all the time. Where it's like we have clients who are like contractors, and the amount of money that they're making is absolutely absurd. Like it's absolutely absurd. And then like plumbing and like jobs that are not super glamorous, but just make tons of money. And if you pitch that to kids, I mean, especially like young men, it's like you don't have to go to a 4-year degree. You can be done with your trade
School
school
so
whenever,
fast.
and then you come out and you're making really solid money. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not just like plumbing and contracting. There's like so
there's
many
so
other ones, like
many.
welding and stuff like that. Like you'll make
Yeah.
so much money. That's way more of an attractive pitch than the pitch that a lot of students are getting in high school, where it's like 200 grand in debt, and then you're not gonna have a job on the other end of it. But I mean, you
Yeah,
get the party for 4 years. I guess that's what you get out of it. Yeah,
they don't really advertise it that way. Yeah, no, it's interesting. It really is. And I think too, the interesting thing about the skill, like the trade skills, is like you could actually apply those to life. Like if you know how to fix things, you
oh
can
yeah,
fix everything. Like it
yeah.
is actually like a pretty cool life skill to have, where, some of these degrees, it's like
Underwater
you
basket weaving.
yeah, like it's a weird, yeah, that's your favorite degree.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a weird, I don't know. I do think there's obviously a role for college. Going to
absolutely. Yeah,
college is certainly, yeah, it makes sense. But I do think a big part of the problem is, like you said, the propaganda, and it all leads back to marketing, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the influence that the
yeah,
words
sure.
that you choose and the information that gets put out, I think it's more powerful than, and it starts early and it keeps going and going until somebody's ready to, you're 18 and you're making a decision about what to go and do. And I think, it kind of all comes full circle to choosing your words and thinking about what you're trying to achieve and all that.
That is pretty powerful marketing. I never thought about it like that. Our colleges and universities like the best marketers ever, that they're able to basically con lending. They're con the banks to give people these like crazy loans for something that they're never going to be able to pay back. And then also I mean, kids are easy to convince. Kids will spend whatever $1,000 on shoes because they're Michael Jordan shoes, they're Jordan shoes.
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
mean, so are they the best marketers of all time? I think you probably make a pretty good case for that.
I think they might be. Yeah. Well, there are a
Them and
lot of good
Apple. Them and
ones.
Apple.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones out there. Yeah, Apple. You need to spend so much more money every other year for a new phone that does
That's
nothing else.
that does the exact same thing that it did before.
Yes. Yeah, it's awesome. But anyway, yeah, I mean, full circle, right? Back to the skills gap piece. There's a lot of different things going on. There's a lot of things at play: technology, employers, colleges, universities, trade programs. But I think the more that AI and, tools like ChatGPT, or just in general, it's actually pretty amazing what technology can do from a learning point of view at this point. It can learn your system. I work with one of the clients that Derek, we both work on. They their software learns the rules in your system as it goes. And so
Mm.
it's continually getting smarter and getting better and staying ahead. And it's a cybersecurity company. And that software it's learning and it's becoming more valuable from, the day you install it to the day that you're potentially, using it for something else. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing when you dig into some of this technology, the stuff that it can do. So I think it's silly for people to think that it's not going to be prevalent in almost every industry in the
Yeah,
next, 5 to 10 years.
for sure. And then to take like the more optimistic position, um, like I can just use myself as a personal example. Like ChatGPT in particular, just because it's the one that everybody's familiar with, is it can dramatically increase your productivity and your like value. Because I mean, like the stuff that I'm doing with ChatGPT, where you can like I don't know how to write code in Python, but like I've written programs in Python with the assistance of ChatGPT. Like it's so
Yeah.
good, it would blow your mind. If you haven't used it and you're not scared about them collecting all of your data, which they probably are, and it's learning everything about you. But put that on the back burner for a second. It is a really cool tool, and yeah, I mean that is the more optimistic position, that it's just
Yeah.
going to make workers like wildly more productive and wildly more uh, valuable to employers if they can harness these tools, and for
Yeah.
businesses too. If businesses are able to utilize these tools, you are more valuable to your clients.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, work with it. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be viewed as it's going to take your job, your job's going to go
Mhm.
away. Jobs are always going to be needed. It's just that
Sure.
it might be a little bit of a different approach. You might be
Mhm.
working a little bit differently, but there's so much that that tool can do that you can then focus on other things. Like you said, productivity, efficiency. There's just so many things that I think can be improved. And again, absolutely need for humans to do jobs forever.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it'll just be a different way of working.
Yeah, like it's the concept of like creative destruction where like technology always destroys jobs, but there will always be new jobs that are created. I'm not in like the
Yep.
full doom and gloom camp that like AI is going to take over like all of the work. I mean, it might, knock on wood that it doesn't, but I mean, like
Yeah.
I take a more pro humanity view where I think that it'll just create new jobs and possibly jobs that humans like even better because all these like highly repetitive tasks type jobs like those aren't very
Yes.
fulfilling for people. So I mean,
Yes,
if you
exactly.
yeah, you could take an optimistic point of view that AI can do all the jobs that humans don't want to do, and that leaves time for us to do the stuff that we actually like doing.
Yeah, no, exactly. I don't think it's the first time that people thought technology might just take over the world, right? Probably
Mhm.
around like the dot com and all
They
of
all
those
didn't know
kinds
what
of
the internet
things.
was back then.
Yeah, and they were
Yeah.
probably like, what's going to happen? Everything's going to shut down and they're not going to need us anymore. And they do, right? It's just different. So
Yeah.
I guess I would say, when you think about if you have, your own, like where you work or, if it's even, kids or whoever, people that you maybe engage with that are around that age, encouraging them to think through how technology is going to play into the career or the aspirations that they have. And we touched on it a little bit earlier, but think about different skill sets, critical thinking and understanding technology. You don't have to be the expert, but
Mhm.
understand it. And I think that that's going to go a long way whether you're an employer or an employee.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's you're never going to I think it's like a Warren Buffett quote. It's uh you'll always have a job if you're like super highly skilled and in a specialized I'm butchering the quote, but that's essentially the gist. I don't have it in front of me, but
Yeah,
it's
I was going to
like
say,
it's
if
like
Nate,
the best way to protect yourself from like getting fired is becoming like irreplaceable is essentially the gist of the quote
yeah,
again.
yeah, if Nate were here, he might be able to fill that in,
Yeah,
but I
probably.
am not Nate, so I can't help you there.
Sorry if there was a mess up in the video there. We had technical difficulties, but I think that's a pretty good place to wrap up. Is there any topic that you want to talk about that we didn't get to, Carly?
No, nope. Just remember, it's not all doom of things going on with technology and the workforce gap. So I think
Yeah,
we're in good shape.
yeah, for sure. There's reasons to be optimistic. So go ahead and tell people where they can either find you on social media or find you on the internet, get in contact with CAG Marketing.
Yep, you can find us at marketingcag.com or through Crosby Advisory Group as well. And yes, go ahead and reach out. Any emails, questions, comments, we're always happy to jump on the phone and even just talk through stuff if you wanted to do just a quick discussion about maybe something that's going on with your workforce or, any marketing related topic.
Sure. Thanks for coming on, Carly. As always, thanks everybody for listening to the podcast. Like, share, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn at Crosby Advisory. Subscribe to the newsletter by going to crosbyadvisory.com/contact, and we'll see you guys next week.
Keep in mind that Crosby Advisory is a registered investment advisor in the state of Ohio, Texas, and Florida. At any time, you can request our forms ADV 2A and 2B, which go into the business practices and qualifications of Crosby Advisory. Today on the show, Derek and I mentioned specific securities, and that is not a recommendation for you to buy them or sell them. Do your own homework, make sure they are suitable for you. Keep in mind, investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal, and you should carefully consider all risks and fees before making an investment.